here to showcase a different kind of art, though. The past 2 years, it's been working to translate Spanish poetry and plays, and we present several work that's been doing translating Hite Caron's book, Big Scenes of a Bit Player. I'll leave the Spanish interpretations to those of you who speak much better Spanish than I do. Now, you may wonder why theater professionals translating Spanish poetry, but I assure you Rick has the qualifications. He holds both undergraduate and master's degrees in Spanish poetry and has studied at the Complutense in Madrid. He spent his first 4 years teaching Spanish at James Madison University, where he first began translating Spanish poetry. While teaching, though, he developed an interest in theater and returned to Michigan State to get his PhD. Now he's come to us with a combination of his talents, over 16 translations of Spanish plays, 3 of which have been published and 5 produced, and the translation of poetry he brings to share this tonight. So please welcome Rick Hite.
That's an awfully big introduction. But thank you, Sarah. Let me say something about Irene Sanchez Carron, because she's really the poet of the evening. And she is a young Spanish poet. I think she was born in 1967, however old that makes her. And I've never met her, but I communicate with her almost daily through the email. And I discovered in Madrid last March a book of her poems in a bookstore, this book, and it had this little ribbon around it. And I often buy books when I see that they've won a prize, and this is one of the important Spanish poetry prizes. So I just picked the book up and bought it and took it back to where I was living, a hotel. And I started reading it, and I thought, gee, I really enjoy these poems. They're kind of deceptively accessible in a way. And I started translating some of them because I just kind of do that as an exercise. And I got into them and really started enjoying them, and I thought, well, before I do very many of these, maybe I should find out whether it's all right to do them, because when I started translating them, I thought, well, there might be a chance of getting them done in the United States or published. So I wrote to her through the publisher. I didn't have an address for her. And about 3 weeks after that, when I got home, I got an email from her, and she's very cautious. She said, well, let me see what you're doing. And so I sent her some, and she said, well, I kind of like those. And so we started going on this, and it turned out, I found out then that she taught English. And in fact, after about 3 or 4 emails in Spanish back and forth, she started writing me emails in English. And her English is really excellent. Her written English, I don't know how. She says that her spoken English isn't as good, but I doubt it. She lives in a city in Extremadura called Badajoz, which is kind of like, I don't know, Wheeling, West Virginia, or someplace like that. I guess it's a city off in a more rural, mountainous area of western Spain, near the Portuguese border. And it's not a city that tourists would go to, that kind of thing. It has some interesting history, of course. But she teaches English in a secondary school there, I found out. And she's been to London, and she's taught in London. And she had a grant to do an exchange program in London. She has several degrees in English and in Spanish philology, it's called over there, which would be like taking a degree in English here or a degree in Spanish here. And she's published only two books of poetry, this being her second book. But she's won already 3 poetry prizes in Spain, national prizes. And she's an up-and-coming young poet. And I think that's going to be an important one. It was already an important one. What she said about the poems in this book that we're going to read from tonight, and the book, the title is called, as Sarah's already told you, Escenas Principales de un Actor Secundario. And that's probably what attracted me, the title also, as well as the little ribbon about the prize. I've translated it as big scenes of a bit actor. And that's kind of theatrical jargon, perhaps, but I didn't want it to sound too pompous. And it might be more literally translated as principal scenes of a secondary actor, and that would be the literal translation of it. She says it's kind of she wants to pay respect or give heed, if you like, to the fact that the anonymous, solitary, not brilliant, ordinary person also has big scenes in her life or his life. And these poems are about that kind of thing. And that's what most of us are, let's face it. So I would say that that the poems are important in that sense. What we want to do, there are three of us who are going to read poems tonight. We'll read a number of them in English, and then some of them also in Spanish, just so you can get the sound of them in Spanish. So we have, and I want to thank some people. I want to thank Sandra Meek for helping out and sponsoring this, helping to sponsor this, and Sarah Calloway and the Ramifications for sponsoring. Sarah's going to be one of the readers, and Maria Parra is also going to read. And Maria and I will do some reading in Spanish, and then all three of us will read some poems in English. So, they've each selected some poems to read, and let me, if you don't mind, I'll start with one, and then ask you guys to come up and we'll take some turns and just read some stuff and make it casual. Can everyone hear all right? Okay. The first poem is a little longer than some of them. Many of them are quite short, and but I'm not going to read this in Spanish because it's a little longer. It's an untitled poem, and it comes before, at the very beginning of the book. Before she breaks this book up into, by the way, into sections that also have to do with the theater, and I'll tell you what those are in a bit. This one's untitled. The true worth in much of what we do lies in our knowing how to wait. Knowing how to wait is, in many cases, one of the great qualities of being human. It is essential that we specialize in waiting for our turn, our day, our scene, the moment. In the meantime, waiting. The crowd passes by. It's essential that we keep waiting. Our thought follows the voice that broke into the evening, or the sound of footsteps coming closer, stopping, hesitating, and at last straying off. In the waiting, we dream away, let love affairs play out, and fondle memories. One story moves forward by dint of throwing out possibilities which together would make another story. It is possible to live out all the possibilities while waiting for the only possible one. Time marches on. The true worth in much of what we do lies in our knowing how to wait. Okay. Who would like to read on a poem or two? And if you would like to read one, read it in English first and then in Spanish. And I think the page numbers are on there for the Spanish, okay?
So first in English and then Spanish?
Yeah, do it first in English so that people can know what it's about and hear it in Spanish.
Okay, this one's called Habitación de Hotel, Hotel Room 1931. A woman has come into the old hotel and goes over to the desk. A woman takes off her gray coat, her hat, her dress, and her memories. A
A woman pulls down the coarse spread of the hotel bed. A woman without a face, almost naked, is sitting on the edge of her life. A woman hides inside her fear, and after reading the letter, surveys her unending loneliness. Una habitación de hotel, 1931. Una mujer ha entrado en el viejo hotel y va hacia el mostrador. Una mujer se quita el abrigo gris, el sombrero, el vestido y los recuerdos. Una mujer retira la áspera colcha de la cama de hotel. Una mujer sin rostro, casi desnuda, está sentada al borde de su vida. Una mujer se esconde dentro del miedo y, tras leer la carta, mide su soledad interminable. El escondite, hide and seek. This one really got to me. I really liked it a lot. Hide and seek. I'm afraid. We were playing hide and seek. I was hiding, and you were hunting me. A long time went by, and you weren't finding me. Spring came and went. The long days of summer faded away, and autumn came with its creaking of dry wood, and winter came with its heartache buried in snow. I wait for you in my hiding place, and I'm afraid. El escondite. Tengo miedo. Jugábamos al escondite. Yo me ocultaba y tú me perseguías. Pasaron largas horas y tú no me encontrabas. Pasó la primavera. Se esfumaron los largos días de verano y vino el otoño con su crujir de madera seca. Y vino el invierno con su dolor de corazón sepultado en la nieve. Te espero en mi rincón y tengo miedo.
Just so we can change voices.
Adolescence. They appear so suddenly, petals of colors, carefree as birds. They sow not, neither do they reap. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet even Solomon in all his glory. But if they touch the roses, they prick themselves. Their blood, if they see the doves fly off, they always cry. Their tears, they pass by and remind us of ourselves, such as we were, uncertain, unique, unaware of their unbearable light. Dawn. While you sleep, I look at you. You remind me of cold spring water on my lips, the meadow underneath my back, the indecipherable dance of clouds, the sweet taste of little fingers in the cookie dough, dirt under my nails, my feet soaked wet in puddles, my pockets stuffed. With you beside me, the days recover the softness of wax and repeat the dawn 1,000 times. With you beside me, I see sadness passing by.
This is called City, Ciudad. It's 8 o'clock again. While on my way to work, like always on the subway, I entertain myself watching my reflection in the window of the car. In the cloudy grime of the glass, my face takes on an air of timelessness and mystery. I prefer the dusty windows of the subway or the windows of stores to mirrors. I haven't looked myself straight in the eye in a mirror for years. It's 1 minute past 8 again. The next stop will be mine. It's hard getting off all the time at the same stop, going to work, keeping our wits, and not getting lost. 2 minutes past 8 of what year doesn't matter. Time keeps moving along. And pain comes visiting day after day, and it just goes to show how tough it all is keeping ourselves on our feet, battered about by unbearable clatter, yet never losing our balance, our wits, our faces, emerging transfigured in the darkness of every tunnel, only to end up feeling the same to us day after day, and getting to work and not getting off at just any stop, but always the same stop, and going back home, always going back. This century starts to grow endless. That's not one of the gayer ones. This one's called The South, the Dream, El Sur, el Sueño. Everything has been erasing time inside me, and I've come back to the stand-still South with its siesta. You perhaps will be asleep in the penumbra of high whitewashed ceilings. I am looking for you through the timeless heat of afternoon, while the aged fountain dies of thirst and balconies vomit up flowers. I came because nights were filling up with a crazy sun spilt through the streets. I came because I want to hear again the hooves of wandering horses in my heart. Everything has been erasing time inside me. I came to die. I knock at your door.
Tienda en casa, home shopping. Get it now, with no shipping charge. Your own smile made over and brightened up. Easy to attach, no batteries needed. Biodegradable, self-adhesive, odorless, impervious to bombs. Live war broadcasts, genocides, allied interventions and attacks on non-civilian targets, which turn out to be a bridge, a factory. Maybe even some, you bet, non-civilian playground. Try it without obligation, our smile. Subject to the highest quality control, and start turning on your own special sparkle again for every kind of occasion. If not completely satisfied, we'll gladly refund you your sadness. Can I make a comment? I like this one a lot because it sounded to me when I read it, I could picture one of those programs on TV that I used to watch when I was back in Spain, where they sold stuff over television, home shopping, and it cracks me up. Tienda en casa. Reciba sin gastos de envío su sonrisa restaurada y blanqueada. Fácil de montar, sin baterías, biodegradable, autoadhesiva, inodora, a prueba de bombas. Retransmisiones bélicas en directo, genocidios, intervenciones aliadas y ataques a objetivos no civiles, que al final resultan ser un puente, una fábrica. Quién sabe si algún parque, eso sí, no civil. Pruebe sin compromisos nuestra sonrisa, sometida a los mejores controles de calidad y vuelva a brillar con luz propia en todo tipo de acontecimientos. Si no queda conforme, le devolvemos su tristeza. Lo irrecuperable. The irrecoverable. The dry leaf on the ground hurts me. It will no longer give shade in summer. The sounds which we have lost hurt me. The throb of earth, don't forget it, with its damp murmur of seas searching for the light beneath your hand. I lean out of the corners of my dreams, pursuing those last moments of you, and I suffer this heavy digestion after what was a feast for my senses. The dry leaf on the ground hurts me, and the summers and the days which have gone forever. Lo irrecuperable. Me duele la hoja seca sobre el suelo que ya no será sombra en el verano. Me duelen los sonidos que perdimos, el latir de la tierra. No lo olvides, con su húmedo murmullo de semillas que buscaban la luz bajo tu mano. Me asomo a las esquinas de los sueños persiguiendo tus últimos instantes y sufro esta pesada digestión de lo que fue el festín de los sentidos. Me duelen la hoja seca, los veranos, los días que se fueron para siempre.
Sort of like musical chairs. The Sierra. I stop to rest, and my memory fills up with cherry blossoms. I go on walking, and their sweet scent slips from my eyes to my soul. The rainy season. He showed up by chance in the rainy season, when every minute was a narrow path towards emptiness. He showed up by chance in the rainy season, when all she had was a name to unload to nostalgia. And so, possibly, without wanting to, they found each other, against all odds, when he arrived by chance, perfect from his name to his roots, with his air of coming to stay on, to reinvent the placing of things, to rearrange the passing of hours, to seek shelter a little from the rain.
Sometimes it's interesting if you're trying to translate a poem, the simpler the line is, sometimes it's the most difficult. It's harder to translate. I don't know why that is exactly, but this one, and the one that Maria read, I've written in an alternate for heavy digestion,
Yeah.
which I don't like too much. Just heaviness. I keep playing with these, and it's just like writing poetry from zero. It's the same thing, because you just keep finding something's not right, and you have to go on to something else, and then go on to something else, and go on to something else. I'm sure you've all probably written some poetry, and so you know what that's like. It can always get better. That's the problem. This one's called Geography. And a number of these poems have to do with the relationship between a man and a woman. And not always the happy relationship, but sometimes. You're free, you said. You've all heard that, I'm sure, when someone lets you go. You're free, you said. I looked at you in silence, with the absurd expression of those old rag dolls which you misplaced one day after having dragged them everywhere aimlessly through childhood. You can go wherever you like, you said. And suddenly, the maps shriveled up. There were no open doors. An unseen eraser rubbed out all the streets, and then pain became a road without territory, without boundaries. bridge. I'll read this one in Spanish too. Sure. Bridge. Puente, not the bridge. I just. Too many words fill up my silence today. You talk from your shore, far off and nearby. At times you talk to me, and I feel a yearning to cross the stream through the shallows which your lips offer. I'll read it in Spanish. Puente. Demasiadas palabras llenan hoy mi silencio. Hablas desde tu orilla, lejos y cerca. A veces tú me hablas y yo siento deseos de cruzar la corriente por el vado que ofrecen tus labios. That poem, the word vado, V-A-D-O, is the problem in that poem. Its literal translation is a ford. Ford, you know, a ford is a place where you cross a stream. But ford is not a very poetic word, and it's a problem. So finally, I came up with the idea of shallows because that has a nice double meaning in English too. Do you have any more to do?
Not just it.
You do?
No.
Oh, okay. Well then, I've got some more here, and you have. Okay, you have two more. Okay, let me read one more, and then. This one's called Weather Forecast, and it has a little quote at the top of it by James Joyce. Most of the quotes she uses are in Spanish, but I'll read this one. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe. What a great quote, boy. In a way, it's dangerous to put a quote that good at the beginning of a poem because it's hard to beat that. Every kind of bad weather is headed this way. Travel is not recommended. Close your eyes like guttering candles on the verge of going out in front of some window of silence. Prepare yourself and observe not what is there outside and nearby, but all of the streets crisscrossing the strange geography of remembrance. Also headed this way are heavy showers of moments, of instants, of words, which will intensify by nightfall. There is an approach of strong winds and sadness. It seems advisable to batten down everything and prepare to get through a long winter. Maria. Would you mind? Why don't you do the next couple of stuff? You mind? Okay.
Desencuentros, disencounters. You were looking casually through the window. You were avoiding my eyes, which could not stop looking at you, with the insatiable hunger from not having seen you for years, and the pain of knowing they would never see you again.
The word disencounters doesn't exist in English, unfortunately, but I've titled it that way anyway, because it's a nice word.
Desencuentros. Mirabas distraído a través de la ventana. Evitabas mis ojos, que no podían dejar de mirarte, con la insaciable avaricia de no haberte visto en años y el dolor de saber que no volverían a verte más. Destino. Destino. Destiny. We were suddenly thrown into a scribbled reality. Among old houses, onto gray streets, we will be forever dispensable. No one waits for us. No one will notice that we did not come. Fuimos puestos de pronto en una realidad emborronada. Entre las viejas casas, sobre las calles grises, seremos para siempre prescindibles. No nos espera nadie, ni nadie notará que no vivimos, que no vinimos.
The stubborn ones. Deep in hidden crevices, secret flowers grow in the grass. They are our roots clenched onto rock, which wait undaunted for the rain. In the south of worn-out summers, one hears the dry expectancy of wells. So much beauty lives, so much love. Underneath the snow, roads are dreaming of the blue days of spring and fall. Man. Man made of clay, worked with loving care, docile body emerging from the mud, with lips untouched, with eyes given to wonder. Come, bring your cold soul close to the warmth of my breath, and let the very span of you fall into my arms, that I might be your God in this one hour.
I'll just read a couple more, and then this is called Entreaty. Come, cast your strong nets into the channel of night. I wait for you down deep, without pain and without time. Come, cast your sweet nets into the depth of night, before death drags me away forever. I just want to read one last poem, and I want to thank you all for coming out to listen to these. I know Irene would be really pleased that, well, she knows we're doing it. In fact, I told her we were going to have this reading, and she got on the internet and found the college website. And she wrote me the next day and said, I just visited Berry College. And so she explored the territory. She has a little son called Pedro, and a husband named Ramon, and the book is dedicated to them. Pedro's 2 years old, and he has he's got incredible Spanish eyes. In our play, Picasso is one of the characters, and Rick told us about the kind of eyes that Picasso had, those eyes with such a strong gaze that when he looks at you, you're struck. And that's the kind of eyes that Pedro has. At 2, I don't know, he'll be a lady killer when he's older, I'm sure. This is a longer poem, and it's not quite as accessible as some of the others, but I think it has some fascinating things in it, and I'd like to read it. And it has some theatrical things in it too, which bring the book back in the last poem to the theater imagery. And I think it's fascinating. Is anyone in here a Spanish student, by any chance? Because there's one quote in this poem from the great Spanish poet of the 17th century, Quevedo. I look on the walls of my fatherland. That's a quote from a famous Spanish sonnet about decay and the crumbling of Spain in the 17th century. I don't understand this poem entirely, but see what you think of it. A voice hurls downward without destination like the echo of a scream. A maddened gesture sheared off, writhes dying. Listen to the harmony underwater, perfect beauty to the point of pain, the torn throat sinking into the gray half-light of oceans. Look out through the thick glass of words, contemplate the abyss of this hand buried in sand. The drowned ones look at us with impossible eyes. Their ballooning clothes coloring the sea, they strike beautiful poses underwater. Renaissance hands pointing towards some god. Eyelids opened wide, surprised by death. Heads gently leaning on invisible shoulders. After the pause, the dance begins again. The music reaches out beyond shorelines, limitless, timeless. And then silence takes over the measures. The voice has gone out, and what remains is the rubbing of one's fingers on a music box. Ballerina, slenderness extreme, who in memory ceaselessly turns. Young man, breath still warm, bled of love beneath the moon. Dreams dragging life down in the shipwreck. Life which flows hidden beneath cloth, beneath even the wounded skin, till it floods the hard precision of bone. Remember me. The look of a watercolor, a mastiff trapped between sleeping, pure, gentle thighs. Remember my foot so light on the carpet, me on the brink of feeling like a leaf to be carried off by the wind, like air and blood, like petals, feathers, or death, and not being able to hold on. My pose is not right. I can't get the gesture. My costume is coming apart at the seams, the wires poking out through the silk, and the theater of my soul is empty. No, don't show me the traps, the devices, the secrets behind the set, the costume of the princess embraced by death, who waits for the magic kiss tasting like apples, her soft blonde curls spilling like a sunset, her half-opened lips in the last held breath, the sea spray that trickles down her neck to the wrapped cocoon of her breasts. My pain throws itself from this escarpment of verse and follows treasures which are sinking, music which is fading away, time which has swallowed up beauty. Dreams, only dreams remain. I look out a window with no view. I look on the walls of my fatherland, their ruins held barely in place by syllables, by notes, suspended like stardust in spotlight's beam. Curtain up, the show must go on. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Maria.
Does anybody have any questions for Rick?
Yeah. Have for any questions?
Queries?
Being a translator is a strange kind of existence because sometimes there's a line in a poem, or I translate plays too, that you just wish you could fix or change. But you're not allowed to do that, because the poet or the playwright wrote the line that way, and so that's the way you have to translate. I mean, you can find the best, or what you think is the best way to say it in English, but it has to be pretty much what they said. And And so what it has done for me, translating these poems, is get me back into writing more of my own poetry, because that way I have complete control. And it may not be any good, but at least I can say it exactly the way I want to say it. But with the translator, as a translator, you just have to be faithful to, honest to that writing. And sometimes you think, why? Why did they say it that way? But
did you run across any instances of rhyme or anything in her poetry?
actually, it's all free verse, and she doesn't rhyme. What I've tried to do is keep meter. Spanish doesn't use metrical feet like we do in English. They use a syllable count.
Right.
And then in a line, often there are stresses in the line, in the syllable count. But I've tried to keep the syllable count. In many cases, I've been able to keep it the same as the Spanish. In other cases, it was just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But she is free verse poet, so that makes it a lot easier. I've done some translating of more classical styles, and I'll tell you, it's really tough.
Yeah. So you had some nice alliteration in some of the translations that I didn't know how close that was to alliteration that she maybe
Well,
had.
I am conscious of that too, and if there's something in the original that I can keep, even in the syntax, in all these poems, I have it with only one or two exceptions in all 50-some poems. I have every line saying what the line says, rather than wrapping the meaning into the next line, or that kind of thing. I've been able to do that, which sometimes is kind of hard because Spanish syntax is a lot freer than English syntax. That poem about the leaf was one of the harder ones because of the syntax. It's a really wonderful exercise. In fact, I would like sometime to sit down and spend a summer creating a course of translation as a first level creative writing course, because I think you could really learn a lot and teach a lot in creative writing through the process of translating. And even if someone just had a year or two of any other language, that would be enough, I think. And if you want to, there have been recently some books on translation. It's becoming more and more people are interested in it. If you want to do an interesting exercise, just go into the library sometime and find 3 or 4 translations of the same work, and just find a place in that work and look at them. There have been many translations, for example, of the Iliad, going way back to the 16th century, I guess, in English. Maybe even, I guess that's the early 16th century. And find one place and look at some of those translations and just see. Now, if you don't know the Greek, it's a little harder, but if you find a modern language, like Don Quixote, and there have been quite a few translations of that. Just find one prose passage in it and just see the difference, and it's amazing. And translation is necessary all the time because language keeps changing, and so we in fact, there's been some argument for translating Shakespeare. The Germans do probably more Shakespeare than any other country. And one of the reasons is that he's so contemporary. And one of the reasons he's so very contemporary is because he's been translated again and again and again. So the Germans are listening to Shakespeare in their own language of today, whereas when we see or speak or hear Shakespearean plays, they're in the language of Shakespeare's day. And sometimes, as you know, it's kind of tough. And there have been some arguments for translating Shakespeare into contemporary English, and other people, say, "Oh my God, we don't want to do that." But your own language is the one that doesn't get translated up to date. I mean, we've translated Chaucer, of course. When do you cross that line when it's okay to translate, your own language? And Don Quixote is very contemporary. There's just been a recent translation of that. Um, but that's an interesting thing to think about translation. It's a lot of fun. It's a great exercise. I can't tell you a whole lot more about. I can tell you personal things about Irene. She's just really open, interesting kind of person. And sends emails all the time, and we talk about a lot of stuff. And she's helped me with some of these translations, because she does know English. And or I'll come in Spanish. You don't always have to use a subject pronoun or noun. You can start a sentence off in Spanish with just a verb. And so the subject is ambiguous. Well, that's wonderful sometimes for poetry. You know, you can write a whole poem, actually in prose too. I just finished reading a Spanish novel. There'd be a whole paragraph before you knew who the subject was, you know, because you can just use the verbs without pronouns or nouns. And you can't do that very easily in English. Spanish also has a much smaller vocabulary than English. And as a result of that, the English vocabulary, I mean, the number of words in English is much greater than the number of words in Spanish. And because of that, words in English tend to have more specified meanings. And many Spanish words have multiple meanings, which sometimes can be bothersome and a problem. But when you think about it, that's a great thing in poetry. To have a word that's just really loaded with meaning. And if you translate it to English, you may have 5 or 6 choices. And each one of those is going to cut out all those other meanings. And that can be a real problem in poetry. Well, thanks again. And this is a really neat place. I wish we had it filled up, but it's terrific that you came out. I hope you enjoyed poems. And if you want to look